You've caught me shopping for hammers. You know, when I see something like this, I can't help but think of Walt Simonson's incredible run on Thor.
It can be hard to agree on the best run for some long-running superhero stories. What's the best era on Superman? Is it Silver Age Kurt Swan, or is it the Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely run on All-Star Superman? What was better, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's version of Fantastic Four, or John Byrne's? Does a character like Doctor Strange even have a definitive run? But one character has a run that defines the character, that did it better than had been done before and set the standard for everyone to follow. I'm talking about writer and artist Walt Simonson's indelible run on Thor. Simonson broke into comics in the mid-70s at DC Comics, and by the late 70s he'd begun working for Marvel as well. But in both cases, it was as an illustrator. That changed when he began writing Thor in late 1982 and continued for a nearly 4-year-long run. He also illustrated the book for over 2 years before handing those duties off to Sal Buscema. His work on Thor fit like a glove. He was able to explore what he wanted, as well as bring in new ideas to the title that have since become the status quo. When Walt broke into the industry, he was working on his creator-owned sci-fi book, Star Slammers. Marvel's version of Thor was prone to epic cosmic adventures thanks to being co-created by Jack Kirby. Walt loved drawing dinosaurs, as fans can tell by looking at his signature, which is shaped like a brontosaurus. So it was no surprise that he included Jormungand, the Midgard serpent. Let's take an abbreviated look at 5 elements that Walt Simonson handled so well on his run that it holds up as a fantastic read 30 years later.
That first element I want to talk about? Epic stories.
Crafting an epic story is more than just including a big fight. Simonson built up the suspense. In the first few pages of his run, we witness a mysterious figure destroy an entire galaxy to build up the fire to begin forging a sword. This subplot continues in the comic for a full year as the fire demon Surtur crafts the Twilight Sword and rallies his demon army. This properly heightened the suspense for the reader, who knew that facing Surtur was going to be a bigger challenge than normal. And it was, culminating in 3 issues of battle, which included the Avengers, Thor's father Odin, and his treacherous brother Loki banding together to fight Surtur. One of the tricks to handling Thor is to manage the stakes. He's a powerful character. Simonson used Hela and her rule of Asgard's Hell to great effect. Following Surtur's attack, many civilians were killed and Hela took their souls. As Earth's protector, Thor gathered his own army to enter Hell and recover these innocent people. The stakes here became some ordinary people's lives instead of the universe, but it was no less dangerous for Thor, and in fact, Hela permanently scars Thor's face and sucks his youth from him. A severely weakened Thor is only able to get the upper hand by weakly ripping off Hela's cape, which grants her control over Hell, and threatens to rip it. We never get to see his scarred face. Instead, it's hidden in shadow or a mask until Thor grows a beard to cover it up. This also gave him a new look after 20 years of comics. Another example of an epic story involved Thor's battle with the Midgard serpent Jormungand. Prophecy foretold that Thor and the Midgard serpent would kill one another in battle, thus bringing about Ragnarok, the death of Thor's Asgardian gods. Going into battle, Thor had been cursed by Hela to be unable to die, but also unable to heal. His weakened and broken body was forced to wear battle armor. The actual issue of the fight was told entirely in splash pages and accompanied by an imitation of Viking poetry.
Now bear with me. The next thing I want to talk about? Lettering.
Walt Simonson enjoyed an especially close partnership with the letterer of his Thor run, John Workman. Together, they leveraged Workman's skills in several effective ways. Sound effects became titles. The sound effects would effectively become part of the artwork and page layout as well, such as the word Doom being cleaved in half because the Twilight Sword had finally finished being forged. Unique and crazy sound effects like Skirash were designed for maximum power. But even the word balloons were used in a clever manner. Normally, panels will have dialogue that reads left to right somewhere near the top of a panel. But Simonson and Workman frequently positioned the artwork and split the dialogue so that it would begin at the top and flow through the bottom, forcing the reader's eye to travel across the artwork. It's subtle and clever.
Let's talk status quo changes.
Thor had spent a lot of the last 20 years of stories fighting his trickster brother Loki or aliens. He also had a secret identity, that of the mortal Dr. Donald Blake. Simonson shook that up immediately. In his very first issue, he introduces the alien known as Beta Ray Bill, a protector of his people, the Corbinites, who had fled their galaxy when Surtur destroyed it. S.H.I.E.L.D. had a satellite that spots Bill's ship, and Thor is sent to investigate. After a battle between the two, Beta Ray Bill beats Thor and lifts Dr. Blake's stick, whereupon it transforms into Mjolnir, and Bill is worthy and receives the power of Thor. It was the first time anyone other than Thor or Odin had been able to lift the enchanted hammer. This led to two changes. One, there was a second being who could wield the power of Thor. Thus, Odin crafted a new hammer for Bill to protect his people. Today we have Thunderstrike and a new female Thor among others, but Beta Ray Bill was the first character noble enough to lift Thor's hammer. The second change was that Odin deemed it that Thor no longer needed his mortal disguise, which he had created to teach Thor humility. Instead, he passed that spell on to Beta Ray Bill, who had been genetically and cybernetically enhanced to protect his people, but left him hideous in their eyes. He could now transform back to his mortal form. Thor was now always Thor, and got himself a job on Earth as a construction worker so that he could live on Earth. Finally, Thor got a new look. First, he grew a beard to mask his injuries from Hela. Later, Hela was still angry and cursed Thor to never be able to die, but also to not be able to heal. His injuries began to accumulate, and thus Thor forged for himself a suit of battle armor made from Asgardian steel. Of course, even armor could only do so much for Thor, and his battle with the Midgard serpent takes the final story arc by Simonson in a unique direction that I won't spoil.
Now let's talk about the evolution of the supporting cast.
While Simonson could change the status quo for Thor, giving him a new look and a lack of immortal identity, Thor can only change so much. Thus, the character arcs were largely relegated to an expansive supporting cast, including Balder the Brave, Thor's noble half-brother, Beta Ray Bill, Sif, and his co-workers on Earth and gods in Asgard. Loki had long been a thorn in Thor's side, and continued to be such throughout Simonson's run. And he came up with some wicked ideas, such as sending the unstoppable destroyer to attack Thor when he couldn't heal, literally turning him into mush. But he also explored some of Loki's emotions and desires. When Surtur attacks Asgard, even Loki allies himself with Thor and Odin rather than risk death. The trio declares what they fight for Asgard, for Midgard, for myself. Perhaps no character evolved as much as Balder, Thor's half-brother, and a supremely skilled warrior. When Simonson's arc began, Balder had recently returned from Hell, and the trauma made him forsake ever fighting again. He tried to distract himself with eating and wandering the desert, but when Odin commands him to bring a message to Loki because everyone trusts Balder's word, he is confronted by demons. Balder begs them not to attack him, but eventually you realize he isn't begging for his life, he's begging for theirs. And when forced to defend himself, he slaughters them all. Later, he joins Thor's army to retrieve the mortal souls in Hell. Balder reveals that he wasn't just let out of Hell. He had to fight his way out, past the tens of thousands of people he'd sent there over the many years and battles of his life. He reveals he didn't walk out, he swam out in their blood. In that same mission to Hell, Thor and his army are escorting the souls out of Hell and are being chased down by Hela's demons. Thor decides he will stay at the bridge to hold off the demons while everyone else escapes through the caves on the other side. But his longtime enemy Skurge the Executioner had convinced Thor to let him come along and prove his worth, and he does. Skurge knocks out Thor from behind, and he declares that he will hold the army off himself. He'd previously lost his powerful axe when he destroyed Hela's massive boat that he is fated to one day lead an army of the dead in. So he asks the Asgardians for 2 M16 assault rifles that they had recently picked up on Earth, and faces his final moments in a noble sacrifice showing his hidden humanity. It's such a well done moment that I won't bother reading the page to you, but hopefully you have read or will read this story, and you'll understand the power of the moment known as He Stood Alone at Galabru. It was so well done, no writer has dared to permanently resurrect the character and negate this moment.
And perhaps what Walt Simonson did better than anybody else during his run? Balance.
Ultimately, what makes Walt Simonson's run hold up as a fantastic comic is its balance. There are adventures on Earth and cosmic adventures in Asgard. There are epic battles against giant beasts like Fafnir, and modest moments like finding Elif, the last living Viking, and taking him into battle so that he may enter Valhalla with the honored dead. And that's within the same story. There was the drama of Loki's machinations against Asgard, mixed with the comedy of turning Thor into a literal frog. There was the respect to Norse mythology and exploring the concept of Ragnarok, contrasted with brand new characters like Malekith, the Dark Elf. It combined to form a run in comics that isn't just remembered as the best for Thor, but one of the best in all of Marvel Comics.
It truly was an incredible run. It's just...
Sir, I'm gonna need you to get the out of here.
Oh. Hey, I gotta go.
Clearly, I loved this run. I think a lot of other people do as well. I think a lot of the characterizations and ideas he brought to the table have been adapted by the movies. Thor doesn't have a secret identity. Malekith was the villain in the second Thor movie. His characterizations of characters like the Warriors 3 and Sif, Loki, Odin, I think that the way he portrayed them is really where the movies are taking most of their ideas from. Now, they take ideas from the whole run on Thor, but even like just the look, like they've sort of got a version of his battle armor. Anyway, I just think that Simonson introduced so many cool things. Appreciate y'all listening to me talk on and on. If you haven't checked it out yet, I've been live streaming every single day at 6 p.m. Pacific, drawing something for Inktober. So that's something you can see online every day. I've got a Patreon page, and several people have signed up and supported me this month. I really appreciate that. So yeah, things are going very well for the channel. Got some great ideas coming up that I know will entertain and amuse you. Just for the record, I have put up an exclusive video for Patreon members only. That's something I'll do from time to time, and probably after a certain amount of time, I will release it to everybody. But if you want to see it now, you need to be a patron. Anyway, enough about all that. I hope you enjoyed this look at an incredible run in comics. And until next week, keep reading comics.